make raspberry turnovers. And so the first thing we need to do is make the dough so it can chill in the refrigerator before we roll it out. I'm going to start with 1.5 cups of all-purpose flour, 1/2 teaspoon of baking powder, 1/4 teaspoon of salt. I'm going to stir all that together. And then I'm going to put my bowl in my mixer because I'm lazy. Okay. Now I'm going to, I have a cup of butter that's 2 sticks that I've cut into small pieces. And I am adding to that flour mixture, and then we're going to turn it on and make a crumbly. I just want to break up the butter and get it combined into the flour. It's going to have chunks of butter still in it. That's okay. So, if you look, you can see that there are chunks of butter in it, but a lot of them are broken up and formed into the flour. That's what we're looking for. And then we're going to add our 1/2 cup of sour cream. Right in there. Turn this on. Start again. And so the dough's going to come together. It's going to not look uniform. It's going to be kind of what we call craggy, but it will be a dough. Now what we're going to do is I need to liberally flour my surface. Otherwise, it's going to get stuck. Because of the sour cream, it's a little more of a wet dough than what I'm used to, or than like a pie crust is. It's wetter than that. So, and then I'm just going to kind of manually add a little bit more flour into it. And then I need to grab my rolling pin. Okay, so with my rolling pin, I'm going to roll it into a rectangle, and then we're trying to give layers to this, so I'm going to fold it like you would an envelope. More flour. And then if you ever make croissants, this is kind of the similar way that they do it. It's just a lot of folding, rolling, folding, rolling. This creates that flakiness that we are used to in a turnover crust. Let's see, you can make a square again. More flour. We're going to do this 2 or 3 times. Then we'll wrap it in some saran wrap and stick it in the refrigerator. Then it's going to chill for 30 minutes or so, and we'll start on our filling. All right, now we're going to wrap it up, put it in our refrigerator. So I have it wrapped in saran wrap, and I'm gonna stick it in the refrigerator. Our dough for our raspberry turnovers is in the refrigerator chilling. So now we're gonna make the filling. So I have 2 1/4 cups of raspberries. I used fresh. You are more than welcome to use frozen. I'm a weirdo and I like fresh vegetables and fruits, so if I can find them, that's what I use. I'm gonna turn that on with a 1/2 cup of sugar. So I'm gonna make a slurry of cornstarch. I have 1/4 cup of ice cold water and 2 tablespoons of cornstarch. I'm gonna pour the water in, whisk it together. And then we're gonna add this to our saucepan once all of the cornstarch has dissolved. If you add straight cornstarch, it never breaks apart, and so you kind of end up with chunks of cornstarch in the middle of your fruit mixture. That's not cool. So I have 1/4 teaspoon of cinnamon, and I have 3/4 teaspoon of vanilla. And all we are going to do is stir this around and let it bubble up and thicken up. The raspberries are going to fall apart, as they should, so that they can be a filling. It's going to end up more like a jam in the end. So you'll notice that for raspberry turnovers, you don't need a whole lot of filling. So it's not like my apple pie where it's a mile high. So if you can look, it's starting to bubble up. It's thickening. It's coating the back of my spatula. So I'm going to take it off the heat. I'm going to transfer it to this glass bowl, and we are going to put it in the refrigerator. If I take a hot filling and put it on a cold dough, it will start to cook the dough in one place, and then they're not evenly cooked. And that's not what we want. So we're going to let this cool down to room temperature, then slide it in the refrigerator so that it gets cold, and then we'll roll out our turnovers and start to bake them. So today we're going to assemble our raspberry turnovers. I have the oven preheated to 400 degrees, and all I'm going to do is roll this out, or attempt to roll it out anyway, into a 16 by 16 inch square. This truly is my workout for the day. I'm going to cut the edges off that are not straight, and we can re-roll that. But we need squares in order to make triangles. So I have taken a whole egg and a tablespoon of water and mixed them together to make an egg wash, which I'm going to put all along one edge, one corner, and two sides of the square. I'm going to fill with about 2 teaspoons of raspberry filling, not a lot. Then I'm going to pull and cover. And then get ready to bake. And we're just going to keep doing this with the rest of the squares that we have. I'm going to roll this out a little bit more because this square is really thick. And if you want, you can get a fork and squeeze it together to crimp the edges, or you can just push them together like I did. Either one works. Then we're going to bake these in a 400-degree oven for 20 to 25 minutes. I'll keep checking on them to make sure that they don't overbake. We're going to put our first tray in. I'm going to bake these at 400 degrees for 20 minutes, and then I'm going to check on them. So our last step in our raspberry turnovers is, I like mine a little on the sweet side, so I'm going to make a glaze that I'm just going to drizzle over the top. I have 2 cups of powdered sugar. I have a tablespoon of vanilla. And then I'm going to slowly whisk in a tablespoon at a time water until I get to the consistency that I want. More. So there the glaze is made. And I'm going to take, this is the first tray that we made. And I'm just going to take some on my whisk and drizzle it over the top. And there we have raspberry turnovers.